The discovery. The Exitherians, a highly advanced alien species, prided themselves on their mastery of exploration and technology. Their sleek ships cut through the cosmos like knives, charting new systems and uncovering secrets of the universe. For centuries, they believed themselves to be the pinnacle of intelligence in the galaxy, unmatched by any other species. But that belief was about to change. In the farthest reaches of the galaxy, where light barely touched the void, a faint signal pulsed from the heart of a dense nebula. The nebula, known as the Veil of Shadows, was notorious for swallowing ships and scrambling sensors. Most avoided it, but this time, curiosity drove the Exitherians to investigate. The signal wasn't random noise. It carried a pattern, something deliberate and ancient. The Exitherian exploration vessel, Ilaris, slowed as it approached the edge of the nebula. Captain Rix, a veteran explorer with a sharp mind, stared at the readings on the holographic display. The signal was weak but constant, like a heartbeat calling out from within the swirling clouds. "What do you make of it, Zarek?" Captain Rix asked, turning to his chief scientist. Zarek, a tall Exitherian with pale blue skin and glowing eyes, frowned at the data streaming across his console. "The signal is too complex to be natural. It's coming from something artificial, but the energy signature doesn't match anything in our database." The crew exchanged uneasy glances. The idea of encountering something entirely unknown was both thrilling and terrifying. They were explorers, yes, but even explorers knew the dangers of stepping into the dark without a guide. "Prepare a probe," Rix ordered. "We'll send it in first." The small spherical probe was launched into the nebula, its sensors scanning the turbulent environment. Minutes passed like hours as the crew watched its progress on the main screen. The swirling gases of the nebula made visibility almost impossible, but the probe's instruments painted a clearer picture. Slowly, the outlines of massive structures began to appear. "There," Zarek pointed to the display. "That's no asteroid field. Those are ships." The crew leaned forward, eyes widening. The shapes were unmistakable. Hulking vessels drifting lifelessly in the void. Their designs were unlike anything the Exitherians had ever seen. They were sleek and angular, their surfaces blackened as if scorched by battle. Some were shattered, with pieces floating aimlessly around them, but others appeared almost intact. "An entire fleet," Rix murmured. "How did it end up here?" The probe continued its journey, weaving through the graveyard of ships. Its cameras captured close-up images of hulls covered in strange markings, lines and symbols that seemed more like art than language. Zarek's fingers danced over his console, trying to decode the patterns, but the meaning remained elusive. This material," Zarek said, his voice tinged with awe. "It's advanced, far more durable than anything we've ever seen." "Who could have built this?" Rix asked, though no one had an answer. The probe sent back more data, revealing an enormous central ship that dwarfed the others. Its design was both elegant and intimidating, a perfect blend of form and function. This was no ordinary fleet. It was a masterpiece of engineering. As the probe approached the central ship, a strange energy spike disrupted its signals. The feed cut out abruptly, leaving the crew staring at static. "What happened?" Rix demanded. Zarek checked the readings, his face tense. The probe was disabled. The energy surge came from the fleet. Rix's grip tightened on the edge of his console. "You're saying the fleet is still active?" "Parts of it, yes," Zarek replied. "It's as if it's guarding itself." The crew fell silent. The idea of a derelict fleet protecting its secrets sent a chill through the room. Whatever this fleet was, it was far from ordinary. "Captain," said Salin, the ship's tactical officer, breaking the silence. "Do we proceed?" Rix hesitated. The Exitherians had faced dangers before, but this felt different. This wasn't just a discovery. It was a mystery wrapped in layers of danger. Yet the allure of uncovering the truth was too great to resist. "We proceed," Rix said finally, but cautiously. Prepare the ship for potential hostilities. Zarek, gather a team. We're going in. The Ilaris moved forward, its shields shimmering as it entered the nebula. The crew's eyes remained glued to the viewscreen as the fleet came into view. The ships were even more imposing up close, their sheer size dwarfing the Exitherian vessel. The strange markings on their hulls seemed almost alive, glowing faintly as the Ilaris approached. Suddenly, a low hum filled the air. The ship's sensors detected another energy spike, this one much stronger than before. A message, ancient and fragmented, echoed through the ship's speakers. The language was unknown, but the tone was clear, a warning. The crew braced themselves, their excitement now tinged with fear. Whatever lay ahead, it was unlike anything they had ever faced. And deep within the silent fleet, something stirred. Closer inspection. The Ilaris drifted carefully through the silent graveyard of ships, its sleek hull navigating between the wreckage with precision. Inside, the atmosphere was tense. The crew's excitement was now mingled with unease, and Captain Rix knew it. Whatever this fleet was, it carried the weight of secrets too dangerous to ignore. As the Exitherians neared the central ship, its immense structure loomed over them like a forgotten titan. The vessel was unlike any they had encountered in their centuries of exploration. It was asymmetrically beautiful, its surface a mix of polished metal and jagged scars from battles long past. The faint symbols etched into its hull began to glow as the Ilaris approached, pulsing softly like a heartbeat. "Scans are coming in," Zarek reported, his voice steady but tinged with awe. "This material, it's a hybrid alloy, stronger than anything we've ever encountered. It's not just durable, it's adaptive. It shifts properties depending on environmental threats. That explains why it's still intact after all this time." Zalin muttered, her eyes fixed on the display. But how did they create something so advanced? Zarek shook his head. No idea. But whoever built this fleet, they weren't just advanced, they were visionaries. The Ilaris extended a boarding probe to the central ship. A metallic tendril latched onto the ancient vessel, creating a sealed tunnel between the two crafts. Rix gathered a team of the best engineers and scientists aboard, including Zarek and Zalin, armed with scanners, translation devices, and energy shields. They prepared to step into the unknown. As the airlock hissed open, a rush of cold, stale air greeted them. The interior of the ship was vast and eerily quiet, its corridors illuminated by a dim, flickering light. The walls were lined with strange panels that shimmered as if alive, responding subtly to their movements. "Stay sharp," Rix said, his voice firm. "We don't know what's waiting for us." The team moved cautiously, their footsteps echoing faintly in the hollow corridors. The alien architecture was mesmerizing. Spiraling patterns and intricate carvings covered every surface, blending aesthetics with functionality. It was clear that whoever designed this ship valued both beauty and efficiency. "This technology," Zarek whispered as his scanner beeped. "It's not just advanced, it's intuitive. These panels aren't just controls. They're a part of the ship, almost like a neural network." "Artificial intelligence?" Zalin asked, her hand resting on the hilt of her plasma blade. "Beyond that," Zarek replied. "This ship is alive in its own way." They pressed onward, following a faint energy trail that seemed to lead to the ship's core. Along the way, they passed rooms filled with strange devices, cylindrical chambers, rows of dormant drones, and holographic displays frozen in time. Each discovery hinted at a purpose, but the bigger picture remained elusive. Then they found it. The control room. The massive chamber was a masterpiece of design, its walls curving upwards into a vaulted ceiling dotted with glowing nodes. In the center stood a command console, surrounded by a network of crystalline structures that pulsed faintly with energy. The air here felt heavier, charged with an ancient power that had lain dormant for centuries. "This is it," Rix said, his eyes scanning the room. "The heart of the fleet." Zarek stepped forward, his scanner pointed at the console. As he approached, the crystalline structures flared to life, emitting a low hum. The team tensed, weapons ready, but nothing attacked them. Instead, the console projected a holographic interface into the air, a swirl of symbols and diagrams that none of them could understand. "These markings again," Zarek said, pointing to the glowing symbols. "They match the ones on the hull. But this looks like a language." "Can you translate it?" Rix asked. "I can try," Zarek replied, activating the ship's translation module. The device buzzed as it attempted to decode the symbols. Slowly, words began to form on the holographic display. "Warning, intruders detected. Activate secondary defense protocols." Before anyone could react, the ship trembled and a deep rumble echoed through the chamber. The crystalline structures began to shift, their surfaces hardening into spiked configurations. Panels on the walls slid open, revealing dormant drones that now whirred to life. "Shields up!" Zalen shouted, raising her plasma blade as the drones hovered into the air. Their sleek, angular forms were covered in the same strange alloy as the ship, and their weapons hummed ominously. "We're not intruders," Zarek yelled, frantically working at the console. "I'm trying to disable the defenses." The drones didn't seem to care. They moved with precision, encircling the team as their weapons charged. Rix barked orders, his crew forming a defensive line, but the tension in the air was palpable. These weren't ordinary machines. They were built for war. And then, just as suddenly as the activation began, everything stopped. The drones powered down, their weapons retracting as they floated back into their alcoves. The crystalline structures returned to their original state, and the rumbling subsided. "What just happened?" Zalen asked, her blade still raised. Zarek's eyes widened as he read the new message on the console. "Identity confirmed. Temporary access granted. Proceed with caution." The team exchanged glances, a mix of relief and confusion washing over them. What had just identified them? And why? This fleet, Rix said quietly, wasn't just a fleet. It was a fortress, and whatever it was guarding, it didn't want outsiders to find it. The question hung heavy in the air. If this fleet was meant to keep others out, then who, or what, was it built to fight? Hidden threats. The air inside the ancient ship seemed heavier as the Exitherians ventured deeper. The faint glow from the crystalline walls pulsed rhythmically, almost like a heartbeat, casting eerie shadows across the team. Whatever had granted them temporary access seemed to be watching them, analyzing their every move. Captain Rix kept his plasma rifle at the ready, scanning the dim corridors. "Stay close," he ordered, his voice calm but firm. "This ship might not be as lifeless as it seems." Zarek's fingers danced over his handheld scanner, trying to make sense of the energy readings. "The ship's power systems are fluctuating," he said, his brow furrowed. "It's as if it's waking up, but parts of it are still dormant." "What about the message earlier?" Zalen asked, her blade glowing faintly in the low light. "It said we were identified. How does this ship know us?" Zarek shook his head. "I don't know. Maybe it scanned our DNA or tapped into our ship's database, but whatever it recognized, it wasn't hostility, at least, not yet." As the group moved forward, the corridors widened into a cavernous space, the walls lined with strange, vertical pods. Each pod emitted a faint hum, their surfaces covered with the now familiar alien symbols. Zarek stopped, his scanner beeping rapidly. "These pods, they're holding something," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. The team gathered around one of the pods, peering through its translucent surface. Inside was a humanoid figure, frozen in stasis. Its body was encased in a sleek, armored suit, the material almost liquid in appearance. The figure's face was obscured by a dark visor, but its size and shape were unmistakably human. "Humans," Rix muttered, the word tasting foreign on his tongue. "These are humans." Zarek's hands trembled as he adjusted his scanner. "This doesn't make sense. The humans we've cataloged are primitive, barely capable of leaving their home system. How could they build something like this? Before anyone could respond, a low rumble echoed through the chamber. The crystalline walls flickered, and the pods began to glow brighter. A deep mechanical voice resonated from the ship's core, reverberating through the room. Unauthorized activity detected. Activating containment protocols. Move. Rick sparked, his instincts kicking in. The team scrambled as the floor beneath them began to shift, sections of it folding away to reveal a grid of glowing energy barriers. The pods hissed open, and the humanoid figures inside began to stir. Are they waking up? Zalin shouted, her blade ready. Zarek checked his scanner, his face pale. No, they're activating. The figures stepped out of their pods with unnerving precision, their movements mechanical yet eerily fluid. Their visors glowed with a crimson light, and their armored suits began to hum with energy. These weren't humans. They were constructs, advanced battle androids modeled after their creators. The team backed into a defensive formation, their shields raised. The androids didn't attack immediately, but their stances were menacing, as if waiting for a command. Rix's communicator crackled. Status report. The voice of the Elaris helmsman came through, distorted. Captain, the fleet is emitting a massive energy pulse. Our systems are struggling to maintain integrity. We're under threat, Rix replied sharply. Prep the ship for extraction, but don't move until I give the order. Zarek's eyes locked onto the central console at the far end of the chamber. It was pulsing with energy, symbols streaming across its surface like a living thing. That console, it's controlling them. If I can access it, I might be able to shut them down. Go, Rix commanded. We'll cover you. As Zarek sprinted toward the console, the androids shifted, their visors flaring brighter. A deep, resonant tone echoed from them, a sound that made the Cytherians' ears ache. Then they moved. Fast. Hold them off, Rick shouted, firing his plasma rifle. The others followed suit, their weapons lighting up the chamber. The androids were relentless, their movements almost impossibly fast as they dodged and countered the Cytherians' attacks. Sparks flew as plasma bolts ricocheted off their adaptive armor. Zarek reached the console, his hands trembling as he connected his scanner. The interface flared to life, its alien language shifting into something he could barely decipher. Access denied. Input override. Come on, Zarek muttered, his fingers racing over the controls. There has to be a way to. Before he could finish, the crystalline structures around the console began to shift, forming sharp, jagged spikes that pointed directly at him. The ship was fighting back. Zarek, hurry. Zalin yelled, slashing at an android that had gotten too close. I'm trying, Zarek shouted. He dug deeper into the system, bypassing layers of encryption. Finally, he found something, a command buried deep within the interface. Deactivate defense protocol. Authorization required. Zarek hesitated. Authorization? Whose authorization? His mind raced as he scanned the symbols. Then, a fragment of a previous message flashed in his memory. Identity confirmed. Temporary access granted. Taking a gamble, Zarek input his own credentials, embedding a copy of the Scytherian genetic code into the system. The console paused for a moment, then flickered. The androids froze mid-motion, their visors dimming. The room fell silent. You did it, Rick said, lowering his weapon, his voice filled with cautious relief. For now. Zarek collapsed against the console, breathing heavily. This fleet wasn't just designed for war. It was designed to adapt. It learns, and if it recognized us, then it must think we're somehow connected to its creators. Rix's face hardened, or it thinks we're their replacements. As the team regrouped, a new message appeared on the console, written in the alien symbols, but instantly translating into their language. Proceed to the core. All will be revealed. They exchanged uneasy glances. Whatever waited at the heart of this ship, It wasn't going to let them leave without learning its secrets or paying the price. A genius design. The message on the console faded, leaving the room in a disconcerting silence. The deactivated androids stood frozen, their glowing visors dim, but the faint hum of the ship's systems reminded the Exitherians that they were still inside something very much alive. To the core, Rick said grimly, his voice cutting through the tension. "We've come this far. Let's see what this ship wants to show us." The team advanced deeper into the ancient vessel, following the faintly glowing pathways that seemed to guide them. The corridors grew more elaborate as they approached the heart of the ship, with walls of shimmering material that seemed to shift and ripple like liquid. Zarek's scanner buzzed constantly, overwhelmed by the sheer density of energy coursing through the ship. "This entire structure," Zarek muttered, "it's not just a ship. It's a system. Every piece, every component. It's all connected. The hull, the weapons, the AI, they're not separate technologies. They're one unified entity. It's like the ship is alive," Salen said, her voice low. "It's more than alive," Zarek replied. "It's thinking." The corridor opened into a vast chamber that seemed impossibly large, even by the ship's scale. Towering crystalline pillars rose from the floor, pulsing with energy that danced across their surfaces in intricate patterns. Suspended in the center of the room was a massive sphere, glowing with a soft, golden light. It turned slowly, as if aware of their presence. "Is that the core?" Rix asked, his voice filled with awe. Zarek nodded, his scanner vibrating wildly. "It's the central processing unit, if you can even call it that. It's not just running the ship, it's evolving it, adapting to everything it encounters." The sphere began to emit a series of pulses, rhythmic and deliberate. A projection flickered to life in front of the Exitherians, forming a holographic interface filled with alien symbols and shapes. But this time, there was no need for translation. The message appeared in perfect clarity, as if the ship had learned their language entirely. "You seek understanding. You must first witness the design." Before anyone could react, the chamber darkened, and the holographic interface transformed into a three-dimensional display of the entire fleet. Ships unfolded like blooming flowers, their inner workings exposed in breathtaking detail. Energy conduits, adaptive armaments, and propulsion systems were highlighted, each one accompanied by explanatory visuals. "This is..." Zarek's voice trailed off, his eyes wide. "This is beyond anything we've ever imagined. These designs, they defy the laws of physics as we know them." The fleet's hologram shifted, focusing on the central ship. It zoomed in on its core systems, revealing layers of defenses and redundancies. There were no weak points, no exploitable flaws. Every aspect of the ship had been meticulously crafted to ensure survival against overwhelming odds. Talon pointed to a section of the hologram. "Look at that. An energy lattice that redirects attacks. It doesn't just block weapons, it absorbs their energy and uses it to power the ship." "And here," Zarek added, pointing to another area, "the propulsion system. It doesn't rely on conventional thrust. It warps space around the ship, creating a localized bubble of altered physics." Rick stared at the display, his mind racing. This fleet, it wasn't just built for war. It was built to win at any cost. Every design choice was made to outthink and outblast its enemies. The hologram shifted again, this time showing the creators of the fleet. The Exitherians froze as the image of a human appeared, a figure in a sleek, dark uniform, standing before a council of similar figures. Their faces were stern, their eyes filled with determination. The holographic human began to speak, its voice resonating through the chamber. The words were in a language long forgotten, but the ship translated them seamlessly. "This fleet is our last hope. Our enemy is relentless, their technology unmatched. But we are human, and we will not surrender. We will outthink them. We will outfight them, even if it costs us everything." The hologram zoomed out, showing a vast battle in the depths of space. The human fleet, vastly outnumbered, engaged a monstrous enemy force. The enemy ships were grotesque and alien, their weapons tearing through the human vessels with ruthless efficiency. But the humans fought back with precision and ingenuity, using their fleet's unique capabilities to outmaneuver and outwit their foes. The projection froze on a single frame, the central ship activating its core, sending out a massive wave of energy that engulfed the battlefield. The enemy ships disintegrated, but so did most of the human fleet. Only a few vessels remained, drifting silently into the nebula. The fleet wasn't abandoned, Rick said, his voice heavy with realization. It was left here as a trap, a message, a warning. The holographic human turned to face them, its gaze piercing. To those who find this fleet, learn from us, our ingenuity, our sacrifice, our resolve. Take what we have left behind and ensure our enemy never finds a home among the stars. The projection faded, and the sphere in the center of the room dimmed. The silence that followed was deafening, the weight of the message settling over the Scytherians like a heavy shroud. "This isn't just a discovery," Zarek said quietly. "It's a legacy, and it's asking us to carry it forward." But before they could process the implications, the ship's systems roared back to life. A new message appeared on the chamber's walls, flashing in urgent red. "Unidentified presence detected. Enemy proximity alert." Rix tightened his grip on his weapon. "Looks like we're about to find out who their enemy really was. A record of war." The chamber trembled as the alert echoed through the ship, the crystalline walls pulsing with deep crimson light. The Exitherians exchanged wary glances, their weapons at the ready. The glowing sphere in the center of the room began to shift, its golden light flickering as if struggling against the warning system. "Enemy proximity alert," Salin repeated, her voice taut. "Does that mean whoever the humans fought is still out there? Or worse," Rick said, scanning the room. "They've found us." Before anyone could answer, the golden sphere emitted a soft hum, and a holographic projection flickered to life once more. This time, it was not of the fleet or the humans, but of the enemy they had faced. The image was haunting, a twisted amalgamation of biomechanical monstrosities, their ships pulsating like living organisms. Their designs were grotesque, alien, and disturbingly efficient. The projection expanded, showing the enemy's methods. Planets were consumed, their resources stripped away, leaving barren husks in their wake. Populations were captured, dissected, and assimilated into their machines, their biological essence harvested to fuel the enemy's war machine. Zarek's voice broke the silence, trembling with realization. These aren't just enemies. They're devourers. They don't conquer, they erase. The hologram zoomed in on the human fleet's final stand, showing in vivid detail how they outmaneuvered and outthought their monstrous adversaries. It displayed the human ship's use of decoys, their ability to manipulate gravity wells to trap enemy vessels, and their final gambit, the activation of the central ship's core to unleash an energy pulse that wiped out both sides. The humans didn't just fight them, Zalin said, her voice filled with awe. They found a way to stop them. But at what cost? Rix asked, his gaze fixed on the projection. They destroyed themselves to do it. The sphere hummed again, this time producing a new series of messages across the crystalline walls. "The Devourers will return. Prepare the galaxy. The fleet is yours to command." The team fell silent, the weight of the message settling over them. For a moment, it seemed as though the ship itself was waiting for their decision, as if it could sense their hesitation. Then, the projection shifted again, focusing on a small metallic device embedded in the core of the central ship. Zarek leaned closer to examine it. "That's a data archive," he said, his scanner picking up faint signals. "It must contain the human fleet's complete tactical records, designs, strategies, everything they knew about fighting these Devourers. We need to retrieve it," Rick said, his voice resolute. "If the Devourers are still out there, this information could be the key to stopping them." As Zarek began working on extracting the archive, the ship's systems surged again. The low growl-like hum reverberated through the chamber, and the crystalline walls displayed a new warning. Proximity breach detected. Unauthorized vessels inbound. "They're here," Zalin said, her grip tightening on her blade. The holographic display shifted to show a fleet of approaching ships. They were grotesquely familiar, twisted, pulsating forms, unmistakably belonging to the Devourers. Their vessels radiated a malevolent energy, their movements precise and deliberate, as they closed in on the ancient human fleet. Rix's communicator buzzed with the panicked voice of the Ilaris helmsman. "Captain, we've got incoming. Multiple hostile contacts closing fast. Their energy signatures are off the charts." "Hold your position," Rix ordered. "We're almost done here." Zarek worked feverishly at the console, the holographic interface flickering as the ship's systems strained to maintain control. "I've got it," he shouted, holding up the small metallic archive. "The entire database is in here." As soon as he removed the device, the ship's core emitted a piercing sound, and the chamber began to tremble. The sphere's golden glow intensified, and new messages appeared on the walls. "Activation protocol initiated. Defensive measures online." "What does that mean?" Zalin asked, her voice rising above the chaos. Zarek glanced at the console, his face pale. "The fleet is waking up." Outside, the derelict ships began to stir. Engines that had lain dormant for centuries roared to life, and defensive systems flickered on. The damaged vessels realigned themselves, their jagged hulls knitting together as if the ships were healing. The central ship sent out pulses of energy, awakening the surrounding fleet one by one. The Exitherians ran back through the corridors, the ship around them vibrating with power. Drones buzzed past them, heading toward defensive positions, while the crystalline walls displayed real-time tactical data on the approaching enemy. As the team reached the boarding tunnel to the Ilaris, Rix turned to look back at the ship's core, now glowing brighter than ever. "This fleet isn't just a relic," he said. "It's a weapon, and it's ready to fight." The Exitherians boarded their vessel, the docking tunnel retracting just as the first of the Devourer ships breached the nebula. The Ilaris's crew watched in awe as the human fleet, fully operational once more, began to engage the enemy. "Captain," the helmsman said, his voice trembling. "What do we do now?" Rix held up the metallic archive, his gaze steely. "We learn, and we make sure humanity's sacrifice wasn't in vain." As the human fleet and the Devourers clashed in a storm of energy and fire, the Ilaris slipped away, carrying the knowledge of a war long past and the hope of a galaxy's future. The last defense. The Ilaris emerged from the nebula's dense cloud, its hull shimmering with residual energy from the ancient human fleet's activation. Behind them, the revived fleet lit up the void, engaging the monstrous Devourer ships with calculated precision. For a moment, Captain Rix and his crew were mere spectators to a battle born from a forgotten war. Inside the command center of the Ilaris, the crew scrambled to make sense of the situation. Tactical Officer Xalin stood at her station, scanning the feeds from their long-range sensors. "The human fleet's defenses are holding," she reported, her voice filled with a mix of awe and disbelief. "They're adapting to every move the Devourers make. It's like watching a master strategist in action." Rix nodded but remained focused on the metallic archive clutched in his hand. "Zarek," he said, turning to his chief scientist, "tell me you've accessed the data in this thing." Zarek's fingers flew over his console, his face illuminated by the holographic interface. "I'm in," he replied, his voice tinged with urgency. "This archive contains everything: schematics, battle logs, even detailed analysis of the Devourers' biology and technology." "Biology?" Rix asked, narrowing his eyes. "They're not just machines." "No," Zarek replied, his tone grave. "They're a hybrid species. The Devourers don't just conquer, they assimilate. They take the biological and technological traits of their victims and merge them into their own forms. That's why they're so dangerous. They're always evolving. Rix's grip on the archive tightened, and humanity figured out how to fight them. Yes, but Zarek hesitated. It wasn't just their technology. The humans relied on something else, a strategy they called the Last Defense Protocol. Before Rix could ask for details, the Illyris shook violently, alarms blaring across the ship. The crew stumbled as the ship's artificial gravity adjusted to the sudden turbulence. "Report," Rix barked, steadying himself against the console. Xalan's eyes widened as she stared at her screen. One of the Devourer ships broke through the human fleet. It's heading straight for us. Rix's jaw clenched. Evasive maneuvers. Don't let it lock on. The Illyris banked hard to starboard, its engines roaring as it accelerated. On the main display, the Devourer ship loomed closer, its grotesque form writhed as if alive, its weapons glowing with a sickly green energy. The creature-like vessel moved unnervingly fast, as though it were hunting its prey. "They're jamming our comms," Fallon said, her voice tense. "We can't call for help." "Then we'll deal with it ourselves," Rix replied. "Xalan, prepare the ship's defenses. Zarek, is there anything in the archive that can help us?" Zarek's fingers flew over his console. "The Devourer's ships are vulnerable to concentrated energy bursts at specific frequencies. I can reroute our main power to generate a pulse. But it'll take time." "Do it," Rix ordered. "Galen, keep us alive until then." The Illyris twisted and turned, evading the Devourer ship's relentless assault. Its glowing tendrils lashed out, trying to ensnare the smaller Scytherian vessel. Energy blasts rocked the Illyris, its shields flickering with every impact. "Shields at 40%, Xalan reported, her voice steady despite the chaos. "Zarek." Rix pressed. "Almost there," Zarek replied, sweat dripping down his brow. "Just a few more seconds." A sudden jolt knocked the crew off balance as one of the Devourer ship's tendrils grazed the Illyris, tearing into its hull. Sparks flew as systems overloaded, and the lights flickered. "Shields failing," Xalan shouted. "We're not going to last much longer." Rix's gaze hardened. "Zarek, now." Zarek slammed his hand on the console. "It's ready." Firing the pulse. The Illyris's main reactor surged, and a wave of blinding blue energy erupted from its hull. The pulse hit the Devourer ship head-on, its grotesque form convulsing violently. The green glow of its weapons dimmed, and its movements became sluggish. "It's working," Salen exclaimed. "They're vulnerable. Target their core and finish it," Rix commanded. The Illyris fired its remaining weapons, concentrated beams piercing through the Devourer ship's weakened defenses. The grotesque vessel let out a final deafening screech before imploding in a brilliant burst of energy. Cheers erupted on the bridge, but Rix remained somber. "Good work, everyone," he said, his tone heavy. "But this was just one ship. There's a fleet out there, and we've barely scratched the surface." As the crew caught their breath, Zarek looked up from his console, his face pale. "Captain, there's something else in the archive. Something about the Last Defense Protocol." "What is it?" Rix asked. Zarek hesitated. It wasn't just a strategy. It was a failsafe. The humans knew they couldn't win the war outright, so they built a weapon. Something capable of wiping out the Devourers entirely. But it came at a cost. Rix frowned. "What kind of cost?" Zarek's voice was grim. "The weapon doesn't discriminate. It destroys everything within its range, friend or foe. That's why they called it the Last Defense." The bridge fell silent as the weight of Zarek's words sank in. The humans had created the ultimate weapon to save the galaxy, but it was a weapon of total annihilation. And now the Scytherians had the knowledge to use it. "What do we do?" Salen asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Rix stared out at the void, where the human fleet continued to battle the Devourers. "We fight like they did," he said. with everything we have. But we use this weapon only if there's no other choice. The crew nodded, their resolve hardening. The battle wasn't over, but they now carried the weight of humanity's legacy and the responsibility to ensure it wasn't in vain. Respect and awe. The Illyris hovered on the outskirts of the battle, its crew watching as the revived human fleet fought the Devourers with relentless precision. The ancient ships moved in perfect harmony, adapting to each new tactic their monstrous enemies employed. Every shot was calculated, every maneuver a masterstroke of strategy. Yet even the most advanced designs showed signs of strain. The Devourers were relentless, their grotesque vessels evolving mid-combat, pushing the human fleet to its limits. Inside the Illyris, Captain Rix stood before the holographic display of the metallic archive. The device hummed softly, its surface shimmering with light as it continued to process the vast amount of data within. Beside him, Zarek worked tirelessly, his hands a blur as he decoded more of the human secrets. How long can the human fleet hold them off? Rix asked, his voice low but steady. Vizelen, monitoring the tactical feed, responded grimly. Not long. The Devourers are learning too fast. If this keeps up, they'll overwhelm the fleet within the hour. Rix's gaze hardened. Zarek, do we have access to the last defense protocol? Zarek hesitated, his glowing eyes reflecting the holographic interface. We do. But Captain, activating it would mean everything within a massive radius would be obliterated. The human fleet, the Devourers, even us, it would all be gone. Rick stared at the display, his mind racing. The weight of the decision loomed over him like a crushing wave. He had seen the destruction the Devourers were capable of, the way they consumed and assimilated entire civilizations. If they weren't stopped here, they would continue their rampage, leaving nothing but lifeless voids in their wake. Captain, Zalin said, breaking his thoughts, the human fleet is signaling us. Rix turned sharply. Signaling us? How? They're transmitting a message directly to our systems, Zalin replied. She paused, her voice softening. It's a human voice. Put it through, Rix ordered. The voice that emerged from the speakers was calm and resolute, with a hint of weariness that spoke of countless battles fought and sacrifices made. The language was human, but the archive instantly translated it into Xitherian. To those who have found this fleet, know that we are humanity's last stand. We left this legacy not just as a warning, but as a gift. Use it wisely, for the enemy you face is one that cannot be reasoned with. They will consume all unless stopped. The voice paused, and when it spoke again, it was laced with an unmistakable sense of hope. We believed in ingenuity, in the power of unity and sacrifice. If you have the strength to fight, then fight. If you must use the weapon we left behind, know that we entrusted it to you because we believed in the goodness of those who would come after us. Choose wisely. Humanity's story is now part of yours. The message ended, leaving the bridge in a heavy silence. Captain, Zarek said softly, the last defense protocol isn't just a weapon. It's a choice. They trusted us to decide if it's necessary. Rix looked around at his crew, their faces tense but resolute. And we won't let them down, he said firmly. Galen, prepare the ship for coordinated assault. Zarek, send the tactical data from the archive to the human fleet. Let's give them every advantage we can. The crew sprang into action, their movements precise and purposeful. The Illyris surged forward, joining the fray. With the archive's data guiding them, the human fleet strategies became even more ruthless, exploiting the Devourers' weaknesses with devastating efficiency. As the battle raged on, the Devourer ships began to falter. Their grotesque forms twisted and convulsed as they struggled to adapt. But then, a massive energy spike erupted from the largest of their vessels, a hulking monstrosity that dwarfed even the central human ship. Energy buildup detected. Zalin shouted. It's a planetary-scale weapon. They're targeting everything in this sector. Rix's heart pounded. The Devourers were preparing to unleash a weapon of annihilation, one that would wipe out both fleets and everything within light years. "Zarek," Rix said, his voice calm but commanding, "prepare the last defense protocol." "Thalen, patch me into the human fleet's command eye." The AI responded almost immediately, its voice calm and composed despite the chaos. "This is the Guardian Core of the human fleet. State your request." "We need to activate the last defense protocol," Rick said, "but only if there's no other way. Can your fleet buy us the time we need?" "Acknowledged," the AI replied. "We will hold the line." The human ships surged forward, their formations tightening as they formed a defensive wall around the Ilaris. They fought with unmatched ferocity, their sacrifices buying precious seconds as Zarek worked to prime the protocol. "Protocol ready," Zarek announced. "But Captain, if we use it." "I know," Rick said, cutting him off. He took a deep breath, his gaze fixed on the holographic display of the battlefield. "Thalen, send a final signal to the human fleet. Tell them, thank you." As Callan transmitted the message, the Devourer's superweapon began to fire. The massive energy beam tore through space, its destructive power racing toward them. "Activate the protocol," Rick shouted. The last defense protocol unleashed a wave of blinding light, its energy surging outward in all directions. The Devourer ships disintegrated instantly, their grotesque forms consumed by the overwhelming power. The human fleet, too, dissolved into the light, their sacrifice complete. When the light faded, the void was silent once more. The Devourers were gone, their threat eradicated. The Ilaris drifted alone in the emptiness, its shields barely holding. On the bridge, the crew sat in stunned silence. Rix looked at the archive, its soft hum now quieter, as if its purpose had been fulfilled. "They trusted us," he said softly, "and we honored that trust." Zarek nodded. "The Devourers are gone, but so is the human fleet." "Not entirely," Rix replied. "Their story lives on, and so does their legacy." The Ilaris turned toward the stars, carrying humanity's final message and its enduring hope into the galaxy.